So this question came from Churd. Talk about RPE versus percentage-based training, or whether bodybuilding assistance can hamper your ability to accumulate as much competition-specific volume and frequency. This is actually a really interesting topic. Gets talked about quite a bit, and I'll start initially by saying that I personally do not program my training off of RPE. I do use RPE as a tool in my training and in my programming, but I don't use that as the standalone method for selecting my training numbers. So I do use percent-based programming. It's basically what I have always done, and I find it super effective for a couple of reasons. The number one being for the way I am mentally, I like to be able to see what I have to do in training on paper going into the gym. I don't like the idea of working up to a kind of unknown number or unknown range based on how the day goes. I think there's value in seeing that you have 400 pounds to hit in the squat, and you kind of feel like poop that day, and you go in and you know what, you just nut up and you get through the training. I think there is some value in that. Relying so much on how it feels that day, I think, can be really inhibitory when it comes to a meet. You start warming up, it might not feel as good as what you're used to. It might feel kind of heavy. Maybe you have to cut some weight, and it kind of, I think, starts playing with your mind a little bit when you know what that weight should feel like on days that you might hit a PR in the gym based on RPE. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that you should grind through all your training based on, the percent that's on the piece of paper. And what I've found really effective is rating all my training sessions on an RPE scale after the fact, and then using that RPE over time as a means to program the progression over the course of the cycle. So if I have a goal at the end of the cycle to have my training hit RPE 9, and then I'm going to back off for a week before ramping back up again, and I can see that my training is going better than what the prescribed percentages are, I'm going to increase my percentages over the course of the cycle slightly as it goes along in order to kind of reach the desired training effect by the end of the cycle. But it's still adjusting percentages based on how that feels. I find it really hard to peak with RPEs as a standalone measure, just because it's hard to predict when those good days are going to come when you're always relying on how the weight feels. You might hit PRs in training, but it might not correlate specifically to a competition. And personally, I find it easier to come into a meet knowing that I'm going to hit my numbers when I've programmed my cycle to hit my numbers at the end of it. So that's something that I found really effective for me. For the most part, I've had really good success with that in the athletes that I've worked with. And that's not to say that RPE isn't a valuable tool or it can't work. There's obviously tons and tons of people out there who have had a lot of success with RPE, and I think all it's really doing is kind of allowing you to understand how you work best as a lifter, whether it be you have a better tolerance for volume or a better tolerance for intensity, because you can see that in your RPE measures rather than potentially relying on a coach to make those adjustments for you over the course of a program. So I think I'll leave it at that as far as the RPE discussion goes. I'll touch briefly on accessory movements and bodybuilding type stuff. And from watching my training, I'm sure you've picked up on the fact that I do use a lot of variance in my training. I wouldn't say they're bodybuilder movements, but I like using lots of different variants in my training. I think it's valuable to build all-around strength over just being specific to the powerlifting movements. Obviously, coming into a meet, you want to be proficient in the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, and have a good grasp on where your numbers are. But as far as an all-around training plan, I think it's important to build up all areas of your body, both as far as giving yourself a base to pull strength from, as well as preventing injuries and that sort of thing. As far as bodybuilding specific movements, I think there definitely is a place for them. I do pull-ups and rows and flies just about every day. It takes about 15 minutes out of my training to get through those things. And I think taking a little bit of time to build up musculature in weak areas is definitely important. It doesn't mean you have to be going balls to the walls, a 10 out of 10 on those, but getting a little bit of extra work in over time is definitely going to pay off. Initially, it might take a little bit away from your training, depending on how hard you're pushing those and what kind of weights you're handling in those movements, but eventually your body will get accustomed to the workload, and it shouldn't affect your training too much, assuming you're being smart with it. Obviously, if you do a 10 by 10 of heavy dips on Tuesday, coming in and doing a heavy bench day the next day might feel a little bit sluggish, but as long as you're cognizant of those little programming nuances, I think that you can definitely make it work. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you have a question you want me to talk about in the next video, drop it in the comments. Hope everyone's training is going well. See ya.